Campagnolo mechanical group sets and gravel riding are two things that I'm a seriously big fan of. I've owned 3 Campagnolo group sets and had the pleasure of reviewing both the rim brake and disc brake 12-speed group sets before Ekar even arrived. So surely Ekar is a home run, guaranteed recommendation from me. Unfortunately, no, it's more complicated than that. And after 10 months of riding, I can't help but feel quite torn on this one and more than a little bit bummed out. So let's go straight into the meaty part of Ekar, the shifting. And Ekar is an adaptation of the classic Campagnolo system with a new double-stepped thumb lever to move the derailleur outboard to the harder gears and the lever behind the brake lever to shift inboard to the climbing gears. You can only shift a single gear at a time with your thumb, but you do get that satisfying sweep action with up to 3 cog shifts in the other direction. And overall, I quite like the ergonomics of the new thumb shifter. It's kind of ugly, but it's actually really easy to reach, even in the drops. And moving into the harder gears isn't particularly quick because you can only move a single cog before waiting for the lever to reset for another click. And there's a lot of cogs on the cassette, 13 in fact, so it can feel very slow if you say roll over the top of a climb and want to get up to speed for a descent. Moving into the climbing gears though is seriously quick with that just beautiful Campagnolo triple cog jump. You can sweep all the way through this entire cassette in just a few swings of that lever. Overall, it's a fine shifting system in general, but it still feels well behind Campagnolo's 12-speed road group sets and even Shimano's 11-speed mechanical Dura Ace. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Ekar is the top Campagnolo gravel group set, but it's more in line with a mid-tier road group set in terms of function. It's closer to Potenza than it is to Record. And shift quality and consistency is the Achilles heel of this group set in my experience. The main problem I found is the narrow ideal operating window and how much work is needed to keep it there. You're dealing with 13 super thin cogs, a super thin chain with super thin tolerances. I've never had a group set need so much adjusting so often. I am lucky enough to ride with a mechanic and spend a lot of time in a bike shop where I can get things tweaked. But without that access, this would be a frustrating group set to live with sometimes. When the group set is freshly adjusted, the shifting is snappy and accurate, but the shift quality would slowly decay after a few weeks. The outboard shifting would get slow and chattery, which is really frustrating on a system that can only move a single cog at a time in that direction. After nearly a year of riding, I've sort of come to accept that that's the Ekar reality. I've never had a group set that needs so much attention so often. A quick note on the ratio options before moving off of gears. I went for the adventure gearing set with the 38 tooth chainring and a 10-44 cassette. And on paper that sounds like plenty of range, but in reality, it is lacking a little bit at the fast end. It spins out at around 55 kilometers at 90 RPM. And you do need to spin pretty quickly to get that over 60 kilometers an hour. The climbing gears, on the other hand, are pretty good. Certainly better than what you get from Shimano's GRX 1x. And it's kind of similar to GRX 2x, but it's not as good as SRAM Force Wide with that 30 tooth small ring and the 36 tooth rear cog. Or you could even do a Force Eagle setup with a 44 up front and a 52 tooth cassette at the back and get, such a good ratio there. So keep that in mind. To get climbing gears, you need to sacrifice access to that 9-speed cog that made a lot of the sort of news when the group set came out. And in my experience, I did find that I need those steep climbing gears more just because of where I live and the type of riding that I do, and also because I like to do a bit of bike packing every now and then, and I would rather have the gears to sort of spin comfortably than really feel like I need all that sort of extra gearing to push over 60 kilometers an hour. Now, before I move on from shifting and gearing, I want to mention that my first Ekar chain just straight up snapped after 800 kilometers. One of the links just gave up without warning when I was rolling away from some traffic lights under quite a modest load. I sure as hell wasn't sprinting. No warning, and it was still in good condition after a summer of only dry riding. That's the only time I've ever had a chain snap across all of my years of riding, so that was a little worrying. But with all that said, let's get a bit more positive because there is a lot of good in this group set, and Campagnolo's braking is a real highlight of all their disc group sets. You get an excellent blend of power and modulation with lever ergonomics that give you plenty of control. Campy's partnership with Magura to develop the system really paid off because I'd say I prefer this to the Shimano GRX Di2 system, which I do really love. All hydraulic disc brakes I've ridden have more than enough power, but what sets the top systems apart is the ability to control it. The Ekar brakes give you excellent feel and fantastic control. I really like them. That said, my group set had a 160mm rotor at the front and a 140mm rotor at the rear, and I'd encourage all buyers to go 160 for the full set. I felt the rear overheated fairly quickly under heavy braking, which meant I've chewed through front pads way faster than normal. So yeah, go 160 at both. The general ergonomics and hand feel are still fantastic. The controls and levers are well placed. I didn't find any major fatigue in my hands after a long day's riding. GRX Di2 is also very comfortable. I'd say Ekar is about the same as that. It's designed quite differently, but it still feels really good. And both of those are far nicer than what I've found after a long day with the SRAM options. They're not quite as good on ergonomics there. Okay, so now on to the tough questions. Do I recommend Ekar? Now, as someone who's tried a lot of gravel group sets and has actually owned all of the flagship gravel group sets from the major manufacturers, Ekar just sits in its own weird category. Shimano's GRX mechanical is both cheaper to buy and will be cheaper to own over time. It has really good shifting and really good braking performance. The SRAM AXS wireless ecosystem is a compelling option too, and I've been quite happy with the Force Wide group set, and you'd hope so because that stuff was really expensive. But the SRAM ecosystem's ability to mix gravel and mountain biking components gives you so much flexibility. The shifting in that ecosystem is reliable too, if a little on the slower side, and the braking isn't quite as refined as the GRX or Ekar, but it's actually where I'd be putting my own money. A GX Eagle derailleur with a 52-tooth cassette and a 46-tooth chainring will give you a great gear range and more consistent shifting, albeit at a higher weight than Ekar. So Ekar lands where so many Campagnolo products do, a purchase that you rationalize with your heart rather than your head. It's beautiful, exotic, light, and not terrible value in that sort of $2,500 to $3,000 Australian price range. But there's no denying you can get better value elsewhere in the market. And that's really where I'm gonna have to leave it. It's just such a Campagnolo group set. And for those who've used and owned Campagnolo long term, I think you'll kind of get what I mean by that. But that is where I'm gonna leave it for this video. Thanks for joining me. As always, don't forget to ride safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time. And don't forget to watch a whole bunch of the other nerdy stuff I have on the channel. Okay, bye.